If you want to improve your live shows for your audience, nothing achieves this quite like a fully programmed light show timed to your music. But if you spend any time looking into this already, you may have become overwhelmed with the amount of information and options out there. So in this video, I'm going to show you what I think is the easiest and most fun way for artists to get started programming light shows like this one.
Sitting in the workshop with some projects on the go, but these lights on overhead would stifle anyone I know. Need some color in the air tonight, wanna make this room shine with a splash of blue and a hint of red, just to nourish my dull mind. Maybe I'm just wired differently, but I can't work unless I'm inspired visually. When the spectrum of lights cuts through my eyes, I see what I need to do right in front of me.
And the first thing on my list is showing you how I program this light show. If you've been following my channel for a bit, you'll probably recognize that the light fixtures I used in that demo are the Petal Modular Lighting Rig that I've been developing, but this video isn't going to be about the hardware I used. Instead, I'm going to tell you all about Showbuddy Active, the software I used to program the lights in this demo. I spent the better part of a year testing out a bunch of different lighting software options to try and find something that would be a bit easier to get started programming your own light shows. And while there are pros and cons to all of the options that I tested, I want to tell you why Showbuddy Active will likely be the best option for you. I will also go through the demo with you guys and show you how easy it was to program some of the key moments and why I made some of the creative decisions that I did. Now, I come from an artist background, and I will always prioritize tools that help keep me inspired and in the creative zone. Admittedly, I can be pretty impatient, so when I started looking at alternative software options, I found myself deep diving into hour-long tutorials just to get a grasp of some of these software's user interfaces. And while these more complicated options might be ideal for a lighting technician or someone that can spend time to focus on this exclusively, I knew many of you, and myself included, would prefer something that doesn't require learning an entire new industry just to get going. And then I tried Showbuddy Active. This software is, in my opinion, the perfect combination of ease of use and capability, and with the ability to load it into your DAW as a plugin, it really feels like just adding another MIDI instrument into your tracks. I want to mention now, before diving into the details, because I don't want to waste anyone's time, that this is not a free software, but I'd say it's definitely on the lower side of the price scale compared to the alternatives. And it's not subscription-based, so you only buy it once, unlike most other options. There's also a free demo available, so you can try it out before you buy it, and I really think you're going to love it. Upon installing the software, we are met with a simple-looking interface, but don't be fooled, the software is plenty capable. It's broken down into 3 tabs. Controls, where you have access to the individual faders, along with some basic oscillation settings for those faders, as well as some sound active options. And frankly, I barely even use this tab, but it's nice to have. There's also a 2D visualizer, which is insanely helpful, and I'll show you why in a bit, as well as some master settings. These parts of the page are always visible on any of the 3 tabs. The second tab is where the magic happens, in my opinion, the Effects tab. This page of the software is so fun and intuitive to use, and I spend most of my time on this tab when I'm programming and playing around coming up with creative scenes to add to my show. And finally, we have the Perform tab, where you can organize all your songs and scenes to be triggered by your DAW, which in my case is, of course, Ableton Live. Setting up for the first time is quite easy too. Simply go into the visualizer and hit the little pencil icon, which will let you add fixtures from the huge library that comes with the software. So if you have any standard DMX lights already, it's likely the exact model will be listed here. Additionally, if you are using DIY lights or a Petal Rig consisting of pixel LEDs, you can add them as generic fixtures by dictating the number of pixels in each fixture and the orientation of those fixtures. Alternatively, if you have a bunch of identical fixtures with the same number of pixels, you can add them all at once by multiplying the number of pixels by the number of fixtures. So in my case, I have 6 of these tubes with 17 pixels each, which is 102 pixels total. I can just add them as a grid by selecting a vertical orientation with 6 rows. Once the fixtures are placed, you can move them around or resize them as you please to match how your fixtures are laid out in the real world. You can also add and adjust beam settings to your preference, which for pixel LEDs I prefer to keep off, but for something like a moving head where you want to see where it will be pointed, having the beams on would be super useful. Finally, if using an Artnet device like the Petal Rig, you will want to add a new Artnet output in the settings of Showbuddy, and then you should be ready to start programming.
You may have become overwhelmed with the amount of information.
So this is how I set up my fixtures for the demo I showed you at the beginning of this video. As you can see, I have 6 tube lights with 17 pixels each, the ceiling light here with 32 pixels, and the lamp fixture right here with 10. This whole rig has 144 pixels, totaling 432 channels, and while you do have the ability to control each individual channel with these faders on the first tab, this would simply not be a feasible approach to programming a show with this many channels. So this is where the effects tab comes in. Here you have a few options for some basic shapes that you can overlay onto your fixtures, and as you can see, your fixtures will light up accordingly. While it might seem limited in shape options, you'd be amazed at how many different looks you can come up with. Using the sliders on the bottom half of the page, you can animate these shapes, stretch them, rotate them, change the colors, blend colors, combine shapes, and so on. And if this isn't enough for you, you can even have the option of importing your own video or image files to project right onto your fixtures. It's so easy and fun to use, I can just spend hours on this page sitting in front of my lights just trying out new things. But how can we start using Ableton to actually control these lights in time with our music? Well, this is another feature of Showbuddy that I absolutely love. The entire program can be opened up as a plugin right inside of Ableton. For most other software out there, you need to have them running as a separate window and then figure out a way to transmit MIDI data to that application, oftentimes requiring third-party software, Max for Live, or even extra hardware to do so. And in some cases, the lighting software is so power hungry, it's recommended to have it running on a completely separate computer to not interfere with your main show computer. But with Showbuddy, it feels like you're just adding another MIDI instrument into your Ableton project. This also opens up the option to use automation lanes to control any of the individual faders, and though this is something I haven't needed to do yet, it's really nice to know I have that option. This level of integration with Ableton is something that gives me peace of mind, knowing all I have to do when I get to a show is open up my Ableton project and I'm good to go. From my experience, Showbuddy is incredibly stable as well. I've had 0 issues with crashing or frame drops, which is something I can't say for many of the other options I've tried. One tip though, specifically with something like the Petal Rig, which can send Artnet over Wi-Fi, sometimes Wi-Fi can be a bit laggy and the lights might not trigger as smoothly as you want, so I use a hardwired Ethernet cable into this little dongle on my MacBook, and I just remember to turn my Wi-Fi off during a performance, which is just a good practice regardless. This is a good time to note that if you are using an Artnet device like the Petal Rig, you don't need any special DMX dongle to connect the lights to Showbuddy. This dongle is just a generic Ethernet to USB-C dongle I bought on Amazon. If you want to use standard DMX lights though, you will need some sort of USB to DMX interface. To actually program the show, I set it up like this. I add 3 new MIDI tracks, one where I load the Showbuddy plugin, one for MIDI clips to control the banks, and one for MIDI clips to control the presets. Just make sure to change your MIDI 2 settings on the banks track to go to Showbuddy channel 15, and the presets track to go to channel 16. Basically, each song will then have a MIDI clip that triggers the appropriate song in the bank, and then an additional MIDI clip on the presets track, which will trigger all of the individual scenes of your song at the exact moments you tell them to. The lowest MIDI note will trigger the first preset or bank on your list, and the next MIDI note up will trigger the next item on the list, and so on. In general, I like to use lights to accentuate key moments or moods in the song, so looking at the demo I made for this video, I wanted the lighting to be simple but dramatic. I knew I wanted to start the video with this flickering light effect timed to the sound effect from the song. So all I had to do was add my first bank and then add my first scene, which after going to the effects tab, you can see it was just a white rectangle over my lamp fixture, which of course just turns the lamp on with a solid bright white color. I then added 2 more scenes, one with a new rectangle over the left side of the ceiling fixture and one with the rectangle over the right side. So the flickering effect is basically just switching quickly between these 3 scenes at specific times, and you can see a visualization of this in the MIDI notes on my preset track. As you can see, I tried to follow my waveform here as best as I could, and every time there was a flicker sound, I'd trigger one side of my ceiling light preset for a split second before returning to the just lamp preset. And doing this over and over again, making sure to alternate between the 2 sides of the ceiling light, you get this really convincing flickering light effect. And then of course, as the final sound effect of the light powering on happens, I trigger my 4th preset, which is the ceiling light with a white rectangle at full brightness over the entire fixture. And I just have to mention how amazing this 2D visualizer is. Back in my first ever video on this channel, I talked a bit about this software called dbaudioware that I used to program my old analog rig. And I loved that program so much, but it was very basic, and the one thing that always bothered me about it was that while I was programming the lights, I had to have the actual physical lighting rig set up in front of me to actually see what I was doing. This meant that on the road, if I needed to make any changes to the lights, I'd have to do it during a sound check when I had the lights set up, which was never not a super stressful experience. Had I had Showbuddy back then, though, with this visualizer, I could have programmed entire light shows on the road or in the hotel room without having to set anything up. And fun fact, dbaudioware, which is no longer supported by the way, was developed by dbaudioware, the same company that developed Showbuddy Active. Hence why they look and operate very similarly at the core, and why I kind of knew I was going to love Showbuddy so much. Anyways, the next few scenes were relatively simple, especially since I wrote this song about lighting, specifically to program lights to. I just referenced the lyrics. So when I sing, I just added a rectangle over my lamp and ceiling light, but instead of making it a solid bright white rectangle, I turned up the saturation a bit and picked a couple random colors from the 2 color sliders here. Then using the repeat knob to add alternating strips of both of those colors and the horizontal slider here to move the strips sideways, I was able to get a nice motion to the lights to add some texture to the room. I did the same for the lines with a splash of blue and a hint of red, where I literally just put a moving blue and white rectangle over my ceiling fixture, followed by a red and white rectangle over my lamp. What I did differently here, though, is I added different amounts of fades between these scenes. To do this, when you select one of your scenes, you can adjust the fade out of that scene using this slider here. So in this case, you can see it will fade from this blue scene into the red scene fairly quickly at 0.11 seconds, but I have it fading really slowly out of the red scene back into this white scene over the course of 1.92 seconds. Now, it's important to note that the fade is attached to each scene regardless of which scene you go to next. So for example, I have a blackout scene here with no fade because the following scene I want to hit really aggressively. And you can see, regardless of which scene I picked next from the list, it will always switch immediately. But later on in the show, I needed another blackout scene, only this time with a long fade out into this white light scene. So I did have to create a duplicate blackout scene and add the fade to it here. So there's a bunch of little things like this that maybe on some of the more complex software, there are more efficient ways to do this. But from a creative perspective, I think this really works well. It's kind of like an additive approach to learning where you can just get started making scenes right away without needing to know the software super well. But as you play with it, you'll pick up these little tricks along the way. As opposed to what I was experiencing with other softwares, getting constantly stuck and having to refer back to tutorial videos every time I needed to figure something out that should be seemingly simple. I'm going to pop in here for a quick second as I'm just finishing the edit for this video. I actually just learned that you can control the fades using CC messages, so you actually don't need to do that duplicate scene thing that I just mentioned. But I wanted to leave that in the video because I think the core of what I said still holds true. For one, it proves that I'm still learning the ins and outs of this software, and yet I was able to program a light show that I was proud of. In fact, aside from learning how to set up my fixtures initially, I haven't yet went back to any tutorials or documentations of the software since. And secondly, it shows that this software is so simple that even if I don't know the proper way to actually do something, I was able to intuitively come up with a simple solution that achieved the same result. And I think that speaks volumes when you're looking for a piece of software that's not going to hold you back from just programming your light show. The drum fill into the chorus was as easy as just adding some rectangles over my tube fixtures and triggering them on every hit of the fill, followed by the main chorus effect, which uses the star field shape, which generates a bunch of random particles that you can adjust the number and size of using these sliders here. And by having them move across the fixtures quickly, you can get this cool sparkling effect. I also added a white flash on the ceiling light and lamp on the first hit of the chorus by adding a scene with a solid white rectangle over those fixtures that quickly fade out into the same scene without that rectangle. Bonus tips! If you have an effect programmed already and you need to go back and change something about it, like the color for example, you can just go into that effect and make your changes. Just be sure that you navigate back to the preset tab and hit the save button before switching to another scene, or you will lose those changes. And while I'm here, there are a couple other noteworthy buttons on this page that I want to address. You have a name button, which lets you rename your selected preset, and a sort button, which when activated will let you reorder your presets and banks in the list. But keep in mind, if you already have MIDI notes placed to trigger specific scenes, those MIDI notes technically trigger the location of the scene in that list. So if you change the order of the list, those MIDI notes will trigger different scenes, if that makes sense. Finally, notice there are two delete buttons, one on the bank side and one on the preset side. Naturally, the one on the preset side will delete the selected preset you are on, and the one on the bank side will delete the entire bank with all of your presets in it. Showbuddy gives you a warning every time that you use either of these buttons, but I have to mention this as I've definitely hit the delete button for the bank side, intending to delete just a single preset, and accidentally deleted a whole song's worth of programming. So just be careful with this, as there is no undo feature on this plugin, which I think is the same with any plugin, but don't quote me on that. For the next drum fill in the chorus, I got lazy and I didn't want to program each individual hit, so I just took a rectangle with this off-white pinkish color and squished it down into a strip using these shape adjustment faders here, and simply moved the entire thing quickly across every fixture I had. This is a good example of how you don't really need to get so granular with your programming, and simple effects like these are sometimes all you need. When we hit the spectrum of lights line in the song, I obviously wanted to bring in a rainbow effect, which isn't something you can do super easily with the built-in effects of Showbuddy, since it only has these 2 color effects per slider. Now, you could theoretically add a bunch of overlapping rectangles with different colors and animate them to not cover each other, but there's a much simpler way. Showbuddy lets you import your own images and videos, so I just found this random psychedelic rainbow image and added it to Showbuddy using this Manage Media button here, and laid it over top of all of my fixtures. To add some motion to this, I just layered a moving white strip over the image to produce this moving rainbow effect. Super easy. And in the next scene, mostly just to show off the capabilities of Showbuddy, I added this video file of this even more psychedelic rainbowy wave thing in the same way that I added the image. Now, the one thing about video files on Showbuddy is it uses this video format called WebM, which is kind of a weird format, but I think it just offers better compression for better performance, and all I had to do was use an online converter to change my video file into this format. So theoretically, if you wanted to, you could create an entire video file on a video editor that is timed to your music already, and just load that in as a full light show. I actually used this method of programming a light show using Touch Designer back in the day. If you want to see how I went about doing that, you can check out the video on the Petal YouTube page here. And the rest of the video was just done using a combination of all of these techniques, and honestly, it was super fun and easy to do. Now, from a stylistic perspective, I'd normally suggest sticking with a more consistent color palette of just 1 or 2 colors per song, but for the sake of this demo, I wanted to kind of go all out. So this is just a really quick overview of how I like to use this software. There's probably a bunch that I'm missing. I honestly haven't really dived into all the individual settings yet. I haven't experimented with the sound active settings. I don't even really know how to use this portion of the Perform tab, but I assume this would be really useful for people that want to trigger scenes live with a MIDI controller or something. But the whole point of this video really is that you can just get started right away with this software and learn as you go. I couldn't find any other lighting software out there that gives you that level of creative freedom from the get-go. And I know for many of you, especially the musicians out there, you just want to get some simple light shows programmed as quickly and easily as possible while still having plenty of capability to grow your shows as you learn. And that's why I highly recommend giving Showbuddy Active a try. Now, after using this software for a while, I actually reached out to dbaudioware because I thought this software was such a perfect match for the Petal Rig. I got in touch with a man named David Brown, and it occurred to me afterwards that the DB in dbaudioware actually stands for David Brown. And I was expecting to have to talk to sales reps and management to see if we could work together, but I was pleasantly surprised to find that David started this company back in 1997 and remains the technical architect and lead developer to this day. In fact, if you go to the Showbuddy Active website and navigate to the forum, you'll see David is still highly active there, answering all kinds of questions about the software. And he got back to me really quickly and was kind enough to give me an affiliate code for the software that will give anyone who uses my link 10% off the product. There are 3 tiers to the software. A basic tier, which gives you 2 universes of DMX channels. A second tier, also with 2 universes of DMX, but adds in the image and video projection feature, which, by the way, can be hooked up directly to a projector as well if you wanted to just project videos during your shows. And a final pro tier, which gives you a whopping 16 universes of DMX channels, which is an insane amount of channels, but with these pixel lights, you'd be surprised how quickly these fill up. I personally have yet to use up a full 2 universes of DMX. In fact, my demo light show here only uses the 1 universe, so as long as you don't have a rig that is effectively much more than twice as big as my rig, you should be fine with either the first or second tier, especially to start. But I do recommend opting for the second tier with that image and video capability. I have to note here that price-wise, this isn't a super small amount, but when comparing to all the other premium lighting software out there, I'd say this one's priced really competitively, especially because this one isn't subscription-based, which if we compare to Lightkey, for example, which boasts a lot of the same features as Showbuddy, the price ranges are similar, but that's only for a 1-year license. With Showbuddy, you pay once and you have it forever. I also know in speaking with David, he is actively working on more features to add to the software, so we can expect to see it grow. And if you really still aren't sure that Showbuddy is the right software for you, the demo version that is available for free to download on the website gives you full access to the software. It just adds a 10-second blackout every few minutes, so you can go ahead and dive into the software, try programming some shows, and if you love it, you can purchase the full version without losing any of the work you did while trying it out. So I hope this video gives some of you the extra inspiration and direction to start thinking about adding that programmed light show to your performance or music videos. I've added the links to the 10% off Showbuddy Active in the description. Just make sure when checking out to use the promo code SUPERVALID to get your discount. Every purchase using this link really helps out the channel and of course helps independent software companies like dbaudioware continue to make game-changing software like Showbuddy Active. And if you're interested in learning more about the Petal Lighting Rig I showed off in the demo, head over to petallighting.com, where we have all the Petal rigs available to watch, or you can just find them on my YouTube channel as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.